The experience of being human has many universal qualities that make it easier to learn together than apart. The purpose of Emotional Warrior Radio is to bring the learning processes one goes through in talk therapy out into the world, so everyone has the opportunity to grow from the experience. Come and join us on this journey. We open the season of Emotional Warrior Radio with a very special guest who has volunteered to take this journey with us by sharing her therapeutic process with our community. In the next few episodes, we will explore her relationship with her mother and the need she has to set boundaries with her, as well as what it's like to be a mom in a blended family. And there will be a few surprises along the way. I believe that most of us will be able to relate to her struggles with her mother, and we'll learn a lot about how deep this connection goes within our own minds, as well as how to start deconstructing any issues we have with self-worth or agency that are being blocked from us working on them due to this connection. And then communicate effectively with our parents due to this inner work. Lastly, this is my first episode too, and I found myself being more candid and forthcoming with our guests because not only is she easy to talk to, but I know you're listening to this process to learn. So I found myself breaking out into teaching moments from time to time a little more often than I would in session. So I do hope that you enjoy this variation on an in-session episode and follow along with us in this journey. And I will see you again after the session. You can start anywhere that you feel is most relevant to you, and then we'll work backwards. Or you can start with me asking questions about the history. That's actually where you get to choose. Would you like to dive in with a situation that's kind of experience near, or have me get you talking about the past, and that will help you?
I do have certain things that have come up recently in my life. But like I said, I didn't necessarily have a plan in place for what we should talk about or how things would go. So I'm also fully prepared to start, at the beginning or, in childhood or whatever.
Yeah, well, then absolutely. Let's do what is happening now, like things that have been happening more recently, and then see how those things are tied back. Seeing how it connects from the present is actually kind of the peeling back the layers or looking at the patterns type of experience. It makes more sense that way.
Yeah, and it's actually progressed more, not so much in regards to my mother, but in regards to my parenting since I last spoke to you, because 3 or 4 days ago, I found out that I was pregnant.
Oh my goodness, congratulations.
Thank you. I know.
Right? Perfect timing.
I know. I was like, oh my goodness. Well, let's just sort it all out now, Good timing.
Yes, this is exactly that. You're going to, and I won't, go too much into motherhood, but the prenatal phase is one where all sorts of different feelings and experiences about the baby and you, it's a very powerful experience. It's profound. And so this is a good time to start to take in new information and do that introspection. Be very creative during this time. It's a very creative time.
Sure. I actually just had a dream last night that I was painting. So I'm thinking maybe my plan is to do something really creative that doesn't have to be produced into the world, something that I can just create for the sake of creation almost, every day or every few days.
Yeah, I completely encourage that. That's been a good experience. I'll vouch for it.
Yeah. So I have been kind of avoiding my mother. I've told my best friend and my partner's best friend, and that's about it, because I still need to, see the OBGYN and get things more solidified before we actually speak to our families. So I've kind of been avoiding my mother and most of my family recently. And I don't think they haven't really contacted me very much recently either, but probably because they were just here at the beginning of the year. And my mother stayed for, I want to say it was like 10 days.
Right.
And then a lot of her rhetoric has been around how she's going to move to where I am in my city. And she'll send me houses and ask me if the neighborhoods are nice. And I'm like, is this for me and my new family, or is this for you? Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's definitely her trying to be in as close proximity to me as possible.
Right. So maybe you could talk, the first story to dive into was, the time that she stayed for 10 days. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little more looking for the dynamic between you and her and how that played out. 10 days is a long time, to host mom. So, maybe you can tell me a little bit about that part first and how it unfolded for both of you.
Yeah, it was pretty good at first. I expected them to stay a little bit longer than everyone else, because my brother came as well, and they were here for like the weekend. And my mom just kind of does that. She will stay longer if she can. Her entire business at this point is mobile. She has her own business out of her house. She runs a publishing company, so she's taken that on the road with her, because she wants to visit me or my brother or my grandfather. And she'll end up staying as long as humanly possible if you let her, So she came in and we did New Year's together as a family, and it was lovely. It was really nice. We ended up watching her dog at our house while they had an Airbnb, because they couldn't take the dog with them, and she didn't let us know beforehand. So suddenly New Year's with all the fireworks, and watching this dog that, is terrified for the next, I think it was 3 days, we watched her dog with no, beforehand knowledge that was ever going to happen. And they stayed nearby, but, a little downtown. So it was nice that after New Year's, after my brother had left, they were, in their own room. And could work there when they needed to. So it wasn't entirely overwhelming like it has been in the past.
But I think that's the part that it has been in the past. You talk about her a couple of times as overstaying her welcome, and you do a little maneuvering around that, right? A little, well, because I expected it because my brother was coming, but I already know about her that she would if you allow it. And so, this is where I think in our thoughts, that's where we can state what we know, and then mask it, and then allow it. So there's a way that we jump into complacency or into the space that is going to most likely be least problematic for mom. And then but it wasn't unproblematic for you. And so this is where I want to get you talking just a little bit more about how it felt, as far as what experiences you had feeling-wise when it came to recognizing that, you weren't really being included in thinking about, like, is that going to be an imposition? The expectation is there, but they're expecting you to say yes, the dog, like any of these kinds of the events that happened that really felt like they caught you off guard, or they were assumptive. What did you feel like during those times?
Mostly like, well, the big one that comes up and probably repeats itself most often is not respected. I am the youngest child in my family, so I feel like I'm not really regarded in that light. Like my brother has, a wife and a nice house, and I've always been the one on the road. I've always, apartment jumped, and I've had more trouble. I'm the troubled one as opposed to him. So yeah, good quote.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I feel I don't have like a certain amount of respect from either of my parents really, or from many people in my family. They tend to make assumptions, or that, mother knows best kind of thing. Well, I made the decision and you're going to go along with it because it's better for everyone, and you're not capable of making those kind of larger choices. So I do feel disregarded in that way. And I don't know. I think at this point, I tend to like disassociate from those moments, and I feel like a bad person when I talk about it to other people. Like when I first got with my partner, and the way I was talking about my mother, he's like, I feel, you're not giving your mom enough room, or you talk about her in this way, and I feel like it's not very loving, and I'm trying my best.
I'm trying to keep up the social defense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to uphold the mother.
Yeah.
But it's crushing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on a weak moment.
and so I'll come in with, once you experience it, then you'll know, because she'll step over you as well.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting is that what you're talking about in so many ways is where people connect and regard one another, which is on the superficial role level. You talked about right away. So this is more, and I'll explain this a little bit, it's a little bit more interpretive right now. So I listened to what you said, and now I am going to kind of say what it means. Right. I put all your words together in a way and kind of synthesize it and the meaning behind what you were saying at a deeper level, because you said a lot there, which, all of this was a stream of consciousness from asking, how did you feel? And really, I think what we don't necessarily come to is we feel it's hard to talk about, I felt sad. I mean, that doesn't give us a lot of information either, but the description of feeling disrespected, feeling like a role. You are a youngest, mistake-making, unstable. I mean, you had a lot of ways of describing how you feel you're seen. Mm-hmm. And I never heard that you felt seen as a person, a human, with experiences that absolutely inform who you are as a person, that have everything to do with all the choices that you've made, that are probably really interesting. Deep, thoughtful, whatever it is. It's your experience. You're a person. You're this, but no one has been qualified as apartment hopper. No. See, that's where, again, I started to say, it's like that just totally dries up any sort of meaning to your experience when somebody just stays as a role or a label. So, and that's, I think, where we come from as well. When you were saying about right there, when you say disregarded, that's the same, probably, feeling for being regarded as this way, and mom knows best, and mom takes care. And so, as long as everyone stays right there, you're supposed to be fine, right? You're supposed to be just fine. You just continue to play the good girl role of allowing this and dissociate. Mm-hmm. You named the literal, defense for what we have to do emotionally in order to tolerate being treated that way. Even if somebody doesn't mean to, or is unconscious of what they're doing because of their pathology or their mental makeup, right? So I think that this is where we go, and we try to keep everything there. And so your boyfriend was basically doing what a lot of people do when they come into psychotherapy for the first, while. How the brain is formed from influences of our mother, father, family, social, is so confronting that they can't even tolerate talking about their experience, the experiences that formed them that were negative and came from a dynamic in their childhood with their mother or father, just as if talking about it was going to annihilate the bond or shatter the facade. Right. Yeah. And then we got to have all these thoughts and experiences and emotions that are going to come to the surface. I've done such a good job, lady, keeping myself in this box. Who are you? I want you just to fix this part. I'm like, well, there's no way we can do that. It's the whole thing. We got to understand it. And all it is understanding, and people have that reaction. So that's kind of a little interpretation, but also an explanation. So as I was talking, what was coming to mind for you?
Oddly enough, something that stuck out to me is sometimes my mother will talk in like the baby talk kind of thing. And I think it maybe comes with some of the disrespect. She'll say, I'll say I was sick last week, and she'll say, oh, I wish I had been there so that I could have made you soup. Your mommy could do it for you. And she'll put the baby voice on. Yeah. Literally infantilizing me to my face.
Right. Well, in that, but how do what feel now? I kind of want to see that. Why do you think that came up? Because that was an infantilizing moment, absolutely. But what else are you feeling there?
I mean, when those moments happen, there's visceral like dread. Like, yeah.
That she might show up.
That she might actually show up and make me soup when I made my own soup last week when I was sick.
Yeah. And so I think now we have a little bit of a dynamic at play here, right? Where mom seems to want to be ultra nurturing. She wants to continue to play the role of mommy to her adult child.
Absolutely.
Call me mommy. I'm going to write a book.
She has called herself mommy dearest before.
Oh, red flag. That's very interesting. Now but that's right. But that is so telling. I mean, those are those kinds of Freudian slips, right? This joke about myself that discloses something about me. But this is where, I mean, it's good that we're creating kind of a composite and understanding of her. And we're going to be able to use that to start to just kind of let you know where we're going, to be able to start to bring her into human form so you can objectively handle her instead of her being what we're going to explore now, which is kind of shifting into the dynamic of how you see your mom. I want you to talk more about your relationship with her, how you see her, your experience of your mother.
Yeah. And in recent years, and this came up when we were talking earlier, that I didn't want to lose, my grandmother, who we were both really close with, passed away at like 74. And that was about six years ago now. And my mother was devastated, and I took on a mothering role for my mother, even though my mother, she wants to be, mommy dearest and take care and be the nurturer and always empty nesting. When I was back at home with her, a lot of the time it was me parenting my mother because she was such an emotional wreck.
And do you notice that? I think that's an important memory. And do you notice that as something in the dynamic in general? Have you felt that you're the youngest too? So this might be a little bit more complicated. Have you felt that you've emotionally needed to take care of your mom before this?
Before my grandmother passed away. Yeah, probably. I feel like so my parents are divorced. They got divorced when I was 8 years old. I think after that time, and maybe it was my dad's responsibility beforehand, it did fall on me and my brother, who stayed with my mom, to be the ones who kind of emotionally took care of her. She would provide the, things and, the housing and the food. And it did fall on me and my brother a lot. My brother and my mother had a lot of friction when, he was a teenager and things like that. I moved out as soon as I turned 18 because I wanted to not feel that weight on me anymore. Yeah, she tends to lean on whoever is around for emotional dependency, so for that codependent support.
Right, absolutely. And in some ways, and I'm not sure about how your brother and her, handled that, but did you ever get in the middle of it? How were you interfacing with that? Did you empathize with either brother, or did you have to take sides and all of that?
Right. I am the master of not taking sides. And I don't know if that's my role in the family or because I'm a Libra, but I have always been agreeable to maybe a fault to say, I see this point of view, but I also see where this person's coming from. So when my brother and my mother were really conflicting, when we had moved to like a new town, my brother and I lived with my grandmother for a little while, which solidified that relationship better for me and my brother as well. Right. We had a lot of friction in the new house because, my brother was a teenager. He wanted I think I was young enough. My brother and I are 5 years apart. I think I was young enough at the time that I didn't really understand why they were arguing so much.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if I was in the middle. I was kind of witnessing it, and then each of them would come to me to feel validated.
Right.
And yeah, I would try to balance, like, have you seen this point of view? I didn't really, it's not like I could sit with my mother and say, you're not considering a 13-year-old's point of view. It wasn't really like that, but she would come to me to kind of spill all of her feelings, and I would just be the listener.
For her, you would, do as much of that. But it's interesting. I think this is where I call, there is an emotional role you played, for sure, and you're the validator. And because you have an equanimity, you have a balance about you, it is in your character, in your temperament. You're not someone who seems to really want to take up arms, right? And say, I want to, you're kind of like, I'm going to get through this. And this is, right. And your understanding even of yourself is very realistic, that you were younger, but still you developed something that's really important during this time. And this is where the negative also lends to why I call all of this emotional warrior stuff is because I think that through difficult situations that we were put in, that we emotionally were able to navigate again and again, become more of a superpower. And yes, they can be exploited. And that's why we need to recognize them and get our energy back from that time, and be able to say, oh, wow, I'm a great listener. I have the ability to empathize and validate, right? These are all really powerful things to be able to do in communication. However, if you don't have internal boundaries that knows how to do that without absorbing it, then we start to feel drained. We start to feel, right? So that's something I wonder if you can relate to.
For sure. And I think, as I'm in my 30s now, I've gotten really good at setting up boundaries in my adult life, where I definitely didn't have them in my 20s. I was more of a carpet, I let people walk over me. I was very non-confrontational, and, people took advantage of me in that regard. And now that I'm in my 30s, I recognize how much more respect I get when I do actually put my boundaries up with other people. And this is, the reason I wanted to speak to you is because the one person in my life that it's still not, I still haven't been able to put that barrier up with is my mother.
Mm-hmm. Right. And as you say that, and you feel emotional, right? And I wonder what comes to mind when you even speak those words of putting a barrier. You didn't say boundary. Just to be really clear, because that's an important indicator that something shifted. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I would say, maybe an unconscious word, say barrier, but I've moved around sometimes to get away from my mother. I do think there needs to be a physical boundary there.
Right. So now I'm starting to understand why her sending these listings of houses close to yours is so difficult.
Yeah, very triggering.
Right. Yeah, very triggering. But I also feel like you have a moment here now just to relax into this space and wonder, and I need to know in order to be able to help you more when you're ready, as far as, why movement away from her, and being as clear, with yourself as you can.
Yeah, that's not something that I've really thought of as to why. It just seemed a necessity to get out from under the weight of carrying her emotions.
And what kind of emotions does she ask you to carry? What do you imagine? Or what are you experiencing?
My mother is definitely the person who will tell you all of her woes. It's hard pressed to have a conversation with her where she's not just telling you everything that's wrong with her life, anything that could be happening with her body, if she's having aches and pains, what went wrong at the grocery store, who pulled out in front of her on her way home. That seems to be the only kind of conversation that she'll have with you. So it becomes, it's just heavy because I don't even know how to redirect it or deflect it. And I have tried in the past to kind of bring a more positive attitude. And, if maybe showing by example, if I'm being more positive, then she'll come with me. And she has in small ways. I think she's noticed it. And I've been more, I guess in my family's eyes, more abrupt at just saying what I'm feeling because my family doesn't really talk about how they're feeling. It's almost like a joke in my family now. I told my brother something that was bothering me that he was doing. I sent him a text message and said, I don't like when you do this. And my mother's explanation to him, he was like, what's that about? And my mother said, oh, you know how she gets.
When she speaks up like this, yeah,
you know how she gets when she's expressing her feelings.
Must be that time of the month, right? All of those kinds of it's the same type of thing. Like there's something about you. It's just that thing. Disregard it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to that respect that I'm lower on the chain of whatever family hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you definitely are explaining an experience of being your mother's emotional container. She's the head of household. She brings in resources. She's taken up more of a position of provider. But she's still a woman with, and I like to talk about men as having a huge emotional range that has been, repressed by society often, right? But in women, when they fall into this role of masculine, being the provider I'm not trying to say that this is what's happened with her, but this isn't uncommon for a woman that has taken head of household type of responsibility to not be, emotionally adept at, nurturing in a way, like emotionally intelligent way, like being a mother. Mm-hmm. And you can see that she's still pretty regressed as far as her mothering ability is concerned. If she needs to, talk to you in baby language and say she's going to come and she wants to fix you soup, she wants to still do kind of the infant toddler stage type of caregiving. And that's, a lot of times a place where some folks are very comfortable and will even have lots of babies in order to stay there. Mm-hmm. Right? But that's something in and of itself, that there's this whole, what I call emotional development gap, right? That you have actually been emotionally developing and maturing, regardless of her inability to help you along that journey. However, because of who she is and her relationship with you, her obviously still, being a provider or being somebody that, again, is trying to supplement possibly some of this lack of emotional connection with things, stuff, mm-hmm. right? That is difficult because in your mind, that becomes love. And so it's how do I set a boundary or up with somebody that it's not even about that for them. It's about the things, so you don't even communicate it, in that way when we're really thinking about this. So it's like, apples and oranges are trying to talk to somebody, but they're really not on the same wavelength as far as understanding that exchange. It's very transactional for her. And she wants to just play a role. And the consequence has been, for quite a long time, you've been the container and you're really talking about for her experience.
Yeah, my mother will often say we're all characters in a novel that she's going to write one day.
Oh, these are all
super big red flags.
Well, yeah, and that's her that grandiosity, that she is the main character and everyone is revolving around her. Mm-hmm. She's writing the book, you're all characters in it, and how can she play you today? And understanding how all the characters work and can manipulate them in certain ways. And even to statements like that, I think it's interesting. How do you react when she says, like, kind of like, this is kind of a side note, but like off-putting? She sounds like somebody grandiose now enough to say things that are like, wow, did you just say that?
Yeah, she does. She'll tend to have those moments. I mean, my family, we might not talk about our emotions a lot, but we joke around a lot. So sometimes the jokes at the dinner table will definitely push the envelope, and we'll all sort of do that. But yeah, my mother will say things, and I don't usually, I'm not surprised by much. My parents were hippies, but I'll see my brother just kind of be like, why would you say that in front of me? Those moments.
Oh, interesting. Brother seems to have, and brother was more argumentative. He seems to have more of an alert system.
For sure.
Letting that person know when they cross the boundary.
Yeah, I guess he does in a way. Everybody thinks of, they kind of just say, well, he's just kind of a prude.
Here we go again. Right?
Another label, yeah.
Right, saying just as well. Anytime you hear that word just, I can what? What are you trying to gloss over? Just a hint. But I think that's where in this dynamic, you're smoothing things over, you're easy because, and this is what has, again, it's positive, but in this regard, once, it's fine. Yeah, parents are hippies and boom, have a lot of experiences, and that's cool. And this is cool. And then we can have other experiences, but, that stem from that kind of fluidity and non-judgmentalness. However, when we're adults and this person still can press the regression button, we can see that there's something going on at a deeper level, that still she's connected to something that's beyond the positives of some of that, right? And using the positives to not look at this part, I think is important to note.
Yeah. Right? You had talked about the gap.
Yeah.
And immediately it brought up thoughts for me of when I did leave the house and I kind of traveled around, just trying to grasping at being an adult in any way possible from the time I was 18. It kind of has a new light recently for me. I think I realized when I'm in a stable relationship now. I'm in a good relationship. I've had, poor ones that reflected on, my codependency, that I learned growing up that I had with other people. I ended a 10-year relationship that was incredibly codependent. In my entire 20s, I spent doing that. And I finally, worked on my own stuff enough to say, now I'm in a good relationship with somebody that, we have a family together, and it feels a lot more healthy. When my parents came to visit in that situation, my mother's visited, my father and his wife, they visited, and I feel a clarity now on that kind of disrespectful feeling that I get from everybody is the gap. I grew up in my travels and kind of trying to be away. And I realized that they don't know me anymore. They know who I was as a teenager and, the more chaotic version of myself that didn't have the physical stability. But they don't know who I am anymore. Like, I was on the phone with my father the other day and I was telling our kid, hey, will you hang on? I'm on the phone, and my dad just said, you sound so motherly. Like he was shocked.
Yeah. Well, I am.
Yeah. That's what I do every day.
That's right. But I think that this is a great phenomenon to kind of, again, put into at least a conceptual term. I call this, because I've worked with adults and their adult children, parents and their adult children, that I said, when I got working with them, I noticed that they had a map in their mind, which is like a Daniel Siegel kind of term, of their child that needed to be updated. It needs to be updated every few months, most likely. I mean, depending on what developmental stage that they're at. And then if not only are they probably not updating their own mental models, but they're not doing that for their kiddos. And that makes for a lot of conflict and not recognizing, again, right? Like, wait a second, how are you saying something that shows me you don't really know where I'm at, who I am, that it conveys that you don't see me, that you just remember me, right?
Exactly.
right. That's this phenomenon, and that you did have space to grow out of this dynamic, out of this family. You grew out of it, and now you've learned a lot. I want to just acknowledge leaving a codependent relationship for 10 years is about as tough as leaving a narcissistic relationship, right? That's incredible. I'm sure that took a lot.
Yeah, thank you. It did. It was like getting divorced, we were,
Absolutely.
Besides the finances, everything we had we had the same, well, we did have the same bank account. I realized one day that I couldn't make someone happy. And I guess I could reflect that onto my relationship with my mother, because so much in the relationship was very reflective of mine with my mother. And I wouldn't be surprised if my ex was a narcissist.
Right. Well, yeah. And to touch on that, the mom is sounding like a blend where there are, the grandiose tendencies, but that's mixed with this codependent need for, to take care and to have worth through others and relationships and things like that. So there's this composite again of those two tendencies. And I'm sure that, and that's in some ways too why I brought it back up. You recognized something. Mom is constantly complaining, never happy, but you recognize with this man, I can't fix you, make you happy, change you. You see me. And what did you come to understand about that relationship? Did you find that you were trying to be seen in a regard? Because codependency sometimes also you're trying to be seen in a certain light. You're looking for them to redeem something that wasn't able to be redeemed in your parent relationship.
I don't really know what I was seeking from this person, except, maybe just an unconditional love that I've been searching for. And he was hyper focused on his life. And granted, there were, plenty of horrible things that he went through as well during our relationship that were really heavy and big in his life. And it got to a point where I couldn't sit, I put it as I couldn't drown with him anymore, because I did feel like we were both getting sucked into what I call the depression pit.
Yeah.
We were both getting dragged into his depression pit. And, I was doing everything I could to have relationships outside of my relationship. So having coworkers and having relationships with people at work that, were positive, and just trying to better myself in small ways, in whatever ways I could. And I ended up getting a really great job with some really nice people. And I felt very, good about myself. Like it was a very adult, career move for me. And I couldn't sustain that and the relationship at the same time. And as much as, in the past, I would have said, well, I'll throw everything away for you. It just hit me one day that there's no sense for me to throw away my whole life for us to sit and, drown in this apartment together.
Mm-hmm. And such an amazing, again, I don't know if you realize it, but just kind of disclosure. But I think there's like gold nuggets. I get so excited when somebody says, this is how I did it. As everybody asks, how, right? But just to reiterate it back to you, is you started to do little things for yourself. I started to have relationships outside of that one relationship. Sounds like the first and most important thing to do. And then progressively started to do better for yourself, really consider yourself and take steps. And as we start to grow, the thing that we're so merged with starts to pull to the foreground. And now we have to look back in order to stay attached to it. And that becomes really stressful over time, right? And I think that's the kind of thing that you would, in this kind of work and in working on yourself now at a very core level, because the mom relationship is usually the one that we have to wait till, you got a lot of priming, right? And you had a lot of work and a lot of peeling back, but it's a very important relationship to start to understand, because it has so much implication on your self-worth, who you implicitly think you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I forgot that in that relationship. I genuinely felt like I was we were one person, that me and my partner had become one entity instead of two different people with different interests. We both forgot that along the way.
Absolutely. And that's a shared mind effect. When two codependent people can come together, it really is. That one's like a super glue. So that's what I'm saying, but that's what's required, is at some point you recognize something, even though you were in this situation, that I can't do this. And you are able to make that break. With mom, and as we're kind of like rounding this out and bringing it together, is that she is somebody who has more power over you. And that's why this process is so important, because you need to grow emotionally stronger, more adept. Even though you have a lot of language experience in this area, there's still something more that seems to need to be reorganized as far as, or faced as far as these feelings are concerned, because the stating of the boundary, not the need for the barrier, at some point needs to occur. And so I wonder what you think would happen if you said, Mom, I know that you've been sending me these posts like of the houses, but this is the place that I'm living in. I don't know if I'm comfortable with you moving here.
Yeah. I've noticed the need to have that conversation. And again, the parallel with my ex would be, I didn't think I could ever love anyone as much as I love this person. And I still sometimes think that I might not love anyone as much as I love that person, but it was so destructive in what it was. And I had to detach and say, I'm not responsible for how he reacts. And I know that that's what needs to happen with my mother. And I guess the difference is, I don't speak to my ex anymore. And, I hope that I would still have my mother in my life. If, I think the worry is that, that I might say something to set a boundary that would completely shatter her world and destroy, her emotionally.
Right. So this is the kind of responsibility that you contain psychologically, as if, and this is pretty heavy, to have somebody's psyche, they're organized within your mind. And if you go and take throw a rock at the glass house, that it will become fragmented, and that she will become disorganized, that she will lose it, that she will become, feel like a massive loss. And I'm starting to kind of associate to what you said about your grandmother and what you witnessed during that time as something that might have left a very strong imprint on why you can't. And doing this is because of what you witnessed there.
Yeah.
However, and this is the golden egg of codependency, we can't hold other people's illness. We can't hold space for other people's falling apart. We can't put them back together. We can't keep ourselves in a place that's frozen with fear that they're going to lose it because it's us, because we're the ones. And this is another thing that starts to become imbalanced that I think is projected into us from the more narcissistic aspects of a parent, is you're the one that holds this. Like, oh, that's really important, until it starts to become something that you can't hold anymore and say, actually, I'm drowning in this. It's very heavy, and I'm literally changing my life in order to create this artificial boundary. But I got to get the boundary right up here, because there needs to be this process that we can go through as far as taking up, again, this idea of mom being somebody that you're holding together. She, and that's probably not a joke. Meaning, like, that's not something you just come up with. There's an overdetermination in your mind of how important that is because of how much she's feeding that too. Mm-hmm. So I think next time we meet too, we can also continue talking about this, because I think this will get the wheels turning just enough and thinking about, oh, I've had this, I know I have this good experience, and I saw how I worked through, and I saw all these positive ways that I dealt with that. You can start to kind of reinforce some of those things, but also start to wonder, what am I doing still holding this? And how is this? And just sitting with it is part of the work. And I say sit with it with the padding of positivity, right? Underneath you, and empathy for yourself, but have the feeling, be with it, understand the situation and all of its complexities, but really start to empathize with yourself and wonder how this is holding you back from growing, as, wow, you're growing too.
Yeah. And I've hung on to it for a really long time. Like you were saying, those avoidant behaviors, the escaping and the running that I was doing and I knew deep down that I was just kind of prolonging the conversation that needed to happen.
Right. But that's this work. The conversation starts with you and really facing these fears. And that process then opens the door to having the real conversation with her. But this first, because this is the part that needs to be healed in some ways before you can speak, just like you healed before you were able to break away that last time too. So I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much.
For sure.
I will see you very soon.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much. This was lovely.
Absolutely.
All right, so I wanted to wrap up the session with a thought, which is, what a great exposition of how broad yet personal the symbol of mother is to our society, childhood, adult lives, thought processes, and sense of self. I don't think it should be of any wonder now why so many people struggle with setting boundaries with such a grandiose conceptualization of a person. However, I clearly believe it's time to shift this paradigm and start to create healthy, balanced ways of conceptualizing our mother as people, so we can evolve the bond from bondage and identification to possible connection and emotionally maturing that connection over time. So next week, we'll explore more about how she still identifies with mom at the deepest levels of her self-concept, and how she might need to face ways she's even like her, as she is already entering motherhood herself. Stay tuned, and I hope to see you there. Goodbye for now.